What is up, everybody? My name's Josh. I'm the Fantasy Football Buff, and today we're going to be talking about Dynasty Fantasy Football, as we always do. And I'm really excited for this video. I put a lot of time and research into this video because I was thinking to myself the other day, I wish I had a Dynasty 101 video that I could have watched a couple years ago when I first started getting into Dynasty, when I was just doing redraft leagues, had no idea even what a Dynasty league was, much less how to get in one, much less how to set one up. So because of this, I've put this video together where we're going to be talking about what a Dynasty league is. We're going to talk about why it's the best way to play fantasy football, hands down. But then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, like what the best format is, how many people should be in your league, how to set up a rookie draft, what the hell a taxi squad is. We're going to go over all of that in the video. And near the end, I hope my league mates aren't watching because I'm going to give you guys a little peek behind the curtain, show you what resources I use to get all of my Dynasty information. And then I'm going to reveal the secret sauce that makes a perfect Dynasty league. So without further ado, guys, this is Dynasty 101, baby. Let's get it. As always, guys, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, like the video down below. I love the momentum we've been seeing. We've getting a lot of subscribers comparatively recently. We got to keep up that movement. All right, I've had a lot of people ask me what a Dynasty League is. I mean, a lot of people just don't know. They don't have experience to it. I've had people ask if it's like a type of a keeper league, and it essentially is, but it's different in a lot of different ways. To answer the question of what a Dynasty Fantasy Football League is, it's simple. You are the general manager for your team. You're the owner. You own a team. The team that you draft, you'll keep for the rest of your life. To the day you die, you will have those players on your roster unless they retire or get severely injured or you trade them away, right? That roster you keep the entire roster from year to year. They're your team, and you get to manage and shape that team as you would like, as you think you'll have success in. And there's four main reasons why I decided that Dynasty Fantasy Football was way better than any other format that I had ever played in. And reason number one is that anyone can win a redraft league. Anyone. Guys, last year, I have a younger cousin. We're playing in a family league. He doesn't know anything about the NFL. And I personally, as you can all tell, I'm addicted to fantasy football. Huge Ravens fan, my cousin is, and he drafted Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews in like the 5th, 6th round, way before anyone ever would have told him to back in 2019. And of course, to a couple injuries to my roster, I'm not trying to make excuses for myself, he won the entire league. Right? My 10-year-old cousin who knows nothing about NFL got lucky on a couple picks and won the entire league. And that comes to reason number two, is that Dynasty leagues are a bigger challenge. You can't rely on luck. You can't rely on one or two specific players you got late in drafts that are going to carry your team. There's so much to take into consideration with a Dynasty League. You got to think about a player's age. You got to think about what contract they're on. You got to think about injuries that they've struggled with in the past and they might be prone to in the future. And then you got to consider about their NFL teams they play on, right? You could have a great player and that gets traded and all of a sudden in the NFL and all of a sudden their value plummets. So all these things you have to take into consideration makes it a much more challenging format to play fantasy football in. Number three is that you'll never totally lose a season, right? I just talked about last year, 2019. I had a couple injuries to my team and I was toast, right? I had my first and second round players, both got injured. My roster wasn't deep enough to take stock against my own team, and I lost the league before it even started, right? And there are so many cases like that where you're sitting there, your team gets injured, whatever happens, happens. It's week 7 and 8, and although you've been looking forward to the season for the whole year, your season's over, right? Just like that, 2 months in, you have a losing record, you can't go forward. With Dynasty, that never happens. Dynasty Fantasy Football is a 365-year-long sport, right? You're always doing something. You're always watching different contracts, different moves, and even if you do lose, well, that will likely give you a higher pick in your rookie draft and give you the ability to rebuild your team. And like I was talking about before, the off-season fun is just so amazing, right? The draft, the combine, the NFL trade deadline, all these events that normally the regular redraft players, they don't care about. The whole season is just so much more fun, and you're constantly engaged and watching those movements throughout the year. So it just makes the whole year a lot more fun. And reason number 4 is that, in my opinion, it's so much more rewarding. Right, I've won redraft leagues before, and it's great. You know, I'm excited to see my teams do well. I love destroying the people in my league, but there's something about having a kid from your hometown or a player that you really liked in college who went out to the NFL and didn't get drafted, right? There's something about that kid going to an NFL team and then sits on the practice squad, and you have him on your team, right? Because you believe in his talent and you believe in the player. And then before you know it, he gets put into their starting lineup, and you see them start getting more snaps, right? Maybe they start this season only playing 30% of snaps. In the second half of the season, they're in that 60-70 range of just playing snaps, not seeing targets, not putting up fantasy football points, but that's a victory for you, right? You normally in a redraft league, if they're not producing fantasy points, they're off my league. They're off my team. But in this case, right, in this case in particular, in Dynasty, you get those small little rewards, right? If a player starts playing more snaps, if he gets upgraded from the practice squad, if they don't cut him after the season is over, there's all these different miniature victories that you get to celebrate, and you get more invested in not only the players, but their careers. And as you watch them, you get to know them more personally almost, even though you don't know them in person. So that's why Dynasty Fantasy Football is by far the best. All right, we've established that Dynasty is by far the best format to be playing fantasy football in. The next question is to what platform should you be playing in? Again, in theory, this league should continue for years and years to come. So you want a platform that's new, you want a platform that looks good, and a platform that will uphold throughout all those years. And I've heard about a whole bunch of different platforms. So I've heard about Flea Flicker, heard mixed reviews, I've heard about Yahoo, and I've played on ESPN. And I mean, I've seen the format, I've played on them before, and they're all decently mediocre. And now I will say this, prior to saying anything, I'm not getting sponsored by anyone. No one's paying me to say this. I have no other intention outside of just talking about my experience. And that is that Sleeper. The Sleeper platform is by far the best platform to play redraft, but especially Dynasty Fantasy Football on. It's incredibly user-friendly, it's amazingly customizable, and visually, right? Just the way they put it all together makes Yahoo and ESPN feel archaic, right? And the information they have on each individual player is insane, right? You can have a team of players, click on your guy, and they'll show the player's age, their height, their weight, how many years have they been in the NFL, where do they rank, you know, so far in the fantasy football season, and then you can see their entire career broken down in fantasy points in this format. And so I have yet to find another format that has all that information for you. And one of the best parts about the Sleeper platform is that anything you could want in a platform, Sleeper has, right? It's incredibly customizable. All the information that you could think in your head that you would want is there, right? And, you know, on top of that, the draft process is really cool, right? It's very, very user-friendly. They give you a very easy way to trade picks. The draft board is really cool looking. The Sleeper app also has a channel within the app itself that gives you constant news updates on what's going through the NFL. So you don't have to be sitting there on Twitter scrolling constantly following beat writers, right? They'll send you the major headlines, the major updates on your phone, because especially in Dynasty, the first person to get that information and act on it typically is the person who's going to have the upper hand in their league. Again, I'm not a sponsor, Sleeper. If you're watching this, please sponsor me. I would love to represent you guys because I love the platform. I'm trying to get all my leagues there, redraft and Dynasty. And I just refuse at this point to use any other. I really do. I'm sorry. Sleeper's the platform for you. So we've established that if you're playing Dynasty, you have to play on Sleeper, right? That's, again, just my opinion. You can explore whatever you want, but that's what I believe you should be doing. But next, let's talk about the team format itself, the team makeup, right? And there are two main things that I really need to hit home with you guys when you're setting up your Dynasty leagues. And Number one is that you need to. This is a must. You have to play in a 2-quarterback or super flex league, right? Where either you super flex, where you have a flex position that you can put a quarterback in, or one where you're forced to start 2 quarterbacks, because the quarterback position in fantasy football is so unique, right? It's so unique in the sense that in a redraft league, I feel if my quarterback goes down, I could go grab a Phillip Rivers off the waiver wire and throw him in my lineup. He could put up double-digit points. He's not gonna have a crazy ceiling, but he'll be serviceable off the waiver wire. But when you're forced to start 2 quarterbacks, you're in this unique scenario. Well, yes, a lot of the quarterbacks have similar outcomes, right? The top 15 quarterbacks all score within the same range of points. But at the end of the day, there are only 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So if you're in a 10-team league and each team is starting 2 quarterbacks, but each team is also rostering a third for bye weeks, injury, whatever, all of a sudden there's only 2 quarterbacks left on the waiver wire. And you could get stuck in a situation where your quarterback gets injured, right, where your quarterback's on a bye week, and there's literally no one to start. It's not like a running back or wide receiver where you could grab like a deep wide receiver 50, right, a top 50 wide receiver off the waiver wire, and they'll give you a couple points. You hope they fall into the end zone. Does not happen with quarterback, right? So it raises the value of the quarterback in your league. In super flex leagues and in 2-quarterback leagues, I mean, quarterbacks normally go in the first 2 rounds. Those top-tier quarterbacks do in that first round of your dynasty startup draft because of their value, right? Typically on a week-to-week basis, top-tier quarterbacks are more consistent. They score higher than most other positions do. And at the end of the day, they have a longer shelf life. You're playing Dynasty. The players that you draft are likely going to be on your team for a very long time. And in 10 years from now, it's very likely that Patrick Mahomes is still going to be slinging the ball. But in 10 years from now, who knows what Ezekiel Elliott's going to be doing with his career, right? Who knows if he's going to be putting up this nearly, I bet you, 10 years from now, there's no way Zeke's putting even remotely close to the same numbers that Mahomes is right now. So quarterbacks skyrocket in value in a dynasty league when you're forced to start 2 of them, and there's a ripple effect. All of a sudden, before you know it, because quarterbacks are so important, this initiates more trades, right? In a redraft league, it would be crazy to trade for a quarterback unless you're trying to grab one of those top echelon guys. But in this league, you might need a starter. You might need that depth. You might want to get another top tier guy so you can start, you have 2 of those top tier guys in your lineup. So not only is a 2-quarterback league more challenging, but it also promotes activity and trades within your league, which is what you want to see. And the second point that you need to do when setting up your dynasty league is getting rid of kickers and defenses. Guys, if I see another screenshot of a team that has a kicker and a defense on it in a dynasty league, I don't know what I'm gonna do, man, because it's just ridiculous. The whole point of dynasty is that you follow players' careers, right? And when it comes to defenses and kickers, a lot of it's just sheer luck and opportunity at that point, right? So it's tough to, they have no place in a dynasty league. Kickers and defenses should not be in your lineup. They're just a waste of a bench spot at the end of the day. And it subtracts the luck aspect of Dynasty and replaces it with sheer skill and research. Now, if you want to do anything else specific, if you want to make it a tight end premium league where you give a half point extra in PPR formats to every reception that a tight end has, go for it, right? I've seen leagues that give extra half point to running backs for every carry they receive. I've seen, there was this one league where you get an extra half PPR point per every pass that a quarterback throws. So there's a lot of different ways you can customize it, right? If you want to increase the value of the tight end, get them more in that top tier conversation, then add some extra points to their receiving work. But I think what needs to be important, only make sure you're starting 2 quarterbacks in every league and make sure there are no kickers and defenses, and you'll have an excellent baseline for your dynasty league. All right, guys, next we're going to talk about roster construction. We've established that you need 2 quarterbacks and kickers and defenses need to be out of here. So I'll go ahead and show you my roster for the favorite dynasty league that I play in. And as you can see, there's 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a single tight end, and 3 flex spots. There is also a 15-man bench and a single IR spot. Now, this is an incredibly high-scoring format, and it's really fun to watch if your team's good. But one thing that I love about this type of format, where you're starting 2 players at almost every position and then 3 flex spots, is that it really emphasizes depth, right? You can't get away with just having, if you just have Christian McCaffrey or just have Saquon, they're no longer able to exclusively carry your team. The teams that tend to have success are the teams that are able to fill that entire roster with legitimate talent. Because at the end of the day, there are only so many startable assets in fantasy football. And you could think for one moment going into the season that you have amazing depth, but then a trade happens in the NFL, or an injury happens, or you're in your bye weeks. And a couple of years from now, before you know it, you'll be struggling to fill those flex spots. So when you have those 3 flex spots and 2 starters at almost every position, it emphasizes the value of rookies and sleepers. You need to have those young guys or those underappreciated players on your roster that develop going into the next year, because again, there's nothing on the waiver wire. The waiver wire is not going to save you. I've seen so many leagues who have to start their second tight end in one of their flex spots, and they struggle from week to week. So this is by far the best way to challenge yourself if you believe you're up for the task. Now we need to talk about the draft. As I've mentioned before, it might be the most important aspect of your Dynasty League, and this draft isn't like clearly in redraft leagues, because the players you pick, you'll be keeping for a very, very long time, hopefully, and this really lays the foundation for what your team will look even 5 to 10 years from now. If you're doing a Dynasty startup draft, it has to be a slow draft where you have 8 hours to pick. In our draft, I'm the commissioner. Everyone had 8 hours to pick. I would pause the draft at midnight Eastern and then restart it at 7 a.m. Guys, it took us almost 3-4 weeks to finish our slow draft, and it was so much fun because we're constantly talking in the chat. People were trading picks, people were trading players. You really get the opportunity through trades to design the perfect team that you would like. And you need sufficient rounds to start to fill up your starting lineup, to fill up your bench, and then to fill up your taxi squad as well. And then in future years, you'll be doing a yearly rookie draft. So the NFL draft will happen, a couple of weeks, a month later, your league will do a yearly rookie draft. Now, my biggest concern as commissioner, I didn't want people tanking. So because of this, in our league, there's a consolation bracket for the 4 teams who don't make it into the playoffs. Now, those 4 teams, whoever finishes on top, so whoever finishes in 7th place, gets the highest chance in a raffle to get the first overall pick. So if you win that consolation bracket, end in 7th place, no matter how the rest of your season went, you will get 4 balls with your name on it put into a bingo machine. And if you're in 8th place, you'll get 3. If you're in 9th place, you'll get 2. And of course, if you're in last place, you'll only get 1. Right, so you'll just have the lowest chance of getting that very valuable 101 rookie pick. We'll put it into a bingo machine, and that's how we'll decide the first 4 picks of the draft. I believe that's the most fair way to do it. I believe that's the best way to discourage tanking, of course, as well. And then from there on out, from picks 4 to 10, we just do reverse playoff order. Guys, if you do it right, if you do it on the Sleeper app, the startup draft and the rookie draft, which again should all be slow drafts, are so much fun, and you get this unique opportunity to design the perfect team that can carry you for years to come. Next, we're going to talk about a taxi squad. Now, if you're new to Dynasty, you probably have no idea what a taxi squad even is, and it's essentially a miniature bench that's designed to allow young players who aren't currently producing in fantasy to develop for the entire season. Now, what's interesting is that this bench locks at the very start of the season. Now, you're allowed to take players off of it, but you're not allowed to put players back onto the taxi squad until the season is completely over. A great example of this is Denzel Mims, right? I drafted Mims this past offseason. Wasn't sure he was going to really produce in fantasy this upcoming year, but he surprised me. And, there's so many flex spots I have to fill in my roster. I had to promote him off my taxi squad. So I raised him off my taxi squad. I had to drop someone from my bench off my team. So I had to lose somebody, but I needed the startable asset, and now I cannot fill that 3rd taxi squad part on my team until the season's over. And that's the whole point, right? We see this time and time again. A great example is Adam Thielen, right? A player who came out from college, didn't even get drafted, and wasn't fantasy viable for 2-3 years until he finally started seeing the field, started seeing the targets, and now he's a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. There are so many guys like that just need the time to develop, but you can't necessarily afford to dedicate a roster spot to them because you need startable assets. At the end of the day, the taxi squad is perfect. It gives you an upper hand over the other people in your league if you do it correctly, and it's all about patience. I'll talk about this time and time again. People always want their rookies to come out and to break records, and the vast majority of the time, that's just not the case. So in our league, our taxi squad is 3 people. It's 3 spots large, and we do allow non-rookies, right? We actually allow players who are within their first 4 years of their NFL career to be on that taxi squad to let develop, because the whole point is that you're letting them develop. You're letting them sit there and grow as a player, not to stash injured players and to use them as an extra bench spot. So again, if you're not using your taxi squad correctly, then you're way behind the 8 ball when it comes to Dynasty. Next, let's talk about free agents, right? You and I have already talked about this. There's not a lot of viable fantasy football players on your waiver wire when you have such deep benches, but there are the occasional player that you need to pick up for your team, and there's really only one way to do this fairly, and that's using a free agent acquisition budget, or FAB dollars. And that's the only system that I ever will use in either redraft or Dynasty Fantasy Football. Now, at the very beginning of the season and at the very beginning of the off season, you are given 100 FAB dollars to spend throughout the course of either the season or the off season, where you bid when the waiver wire runs on free agents. This is by far the best method. It gives everyone a fair chance to acquire a player, and it's fun to see what other people bid. We had the other day someone bid $25 on a player that no one else put a bid on. Right, so it's the best way to acquire free agents, and at the end of the day, as I've already mentioned, it's fair. Right, it's just fair. Like I remember a couple years ago, I was playing in a redraft league, and I remember when Carlos Hyde left the Browns and Nick Chubb started going off, and I was so excited. I wanted Nick Chubb on my team, but I had just picked up some random free agent the night before, and I was given the bottom priority in the list to pick up a guy, so I didn't stand a chance. That's just not fair. It's not how fantasy football should be. If I don't have the ability to pick up Nick Chubb, it should be because I already spent all of my free agent acquisition budget, not because I just rolled the dice and it just so happened that it rolled out that way. So that's the only way I would deal with free agents in your league. Alright guys, this is probably what you came here for, and that was the resources that I use for my Dynasty research. And now there's a lot of different resources out there, and there's a lot of different rankings, and as you and I have talked about before, there's a lot of variance and a lot of subjectivity when it comes to Dynasty value. And so the best way to have success in Dynasty is consume as much information as possible, get to know the players, get to know their situation, and then you can make a decision for yourself. So I'm going to break down a couple different ways to get that upper hand over your league mates. And way number one, and I'm going to go ahead and shamelessly promote myself here, is subscribe to this channel. We're talking about Dynasty constantly. We're talking about sleepers, trends. We're doing videos like this that will break down higher level things when it comes to Dynasty. So if you subscribe to this channel, you're already getting an upper hand over your league mates. We also have an Instagram where I'm constantly posting different Dynasty tidbits, whether it be players, trends, things of that nature. Buy lows, sell highs all the time. Talking about on that page at fantasy.football.buff. Go follow me on Instagram. And finally, we have a Discord community of people who love Dynasty, who are constantly talking about potential trades they were offered, about different contracts. All this conversation is always going on in the Discord community, so go find that link below. There's no reason you shouldn't join us, especially if you're as addicted to football as the rest of us are. Now, a part of staying on top of the news and knowing as much about Dynasty as I can, I just listen to a lot of podcasts. That's one of the main ways I consume information, whether I'm driving around, going to the gym, whatever it is. I'm always listening to a podcast. So here are a couple of my favorites. Number one, the Fantasy Footballers. They're excellent. I think they're the biggest in the world right now when it comes to fantasy football, and they're excellent for redraft, and they do a little bit of Dynasty in the offseason. Same thing for the Fantasy Pros podcast, right? They have great sit-start episodes, and they occasionally have some Dynasty resources on there as well on the podcast. Another podcast that doesn't get enough love is the Late Round podcast by JJ Zachariason. All of the episodes are only between 10 to 20 minutes, and he puts out a couple every week during the Dynasty season, and he just breaks down trends and transactions that you should do. Like, he breaks down snap counts, He breaks down target shares, things like that most stats sheets don't always show. And so whether in redraft or dynasty, he's another excellent resource. But I think the best dynasty podcast by far to listen to is the Dynasty Nerds podcast. I mean, I think they really are the OG, right? They're the first podcast that I can think of that really hammers down on exclusively dynasty content. They have a great YouTube channel where they also do film breakdowns. I'm constantly listening to their podcasts. I'm constantly watching their videos. They're just a great resource to learn more and more about dynasty. Another great way to learn more about dynasty football and get more and do more research is through YouTube, man. One of my favorite YouTube channels is BDGE, Big Dogs Gotta Eat with Nick Ercolano. I love what they're doing over there. They're very entertaining, and they're an excellent dynasty and redraft resource. They have a sub channel as well called Bunk Bed Breakdown, where they break down exclusively dynasty information. So another great channel if you're looking for something exclusively dynasty that has a lot of very valuable information. Another great YouTube channel that I personally watch a lot that helped me get through my startup draft was Dynasty Devi. Another great page that has some amazing fantasy football or dynasty fantasy football information as well. Finding dynasty rankings are tricky, right? Because a lot of trades, a lot of start-sit things, they're very team dependent. So it's tough to have a concrete set of rankings and for you to make your decisions off that. That being said, the Fantasy Pros website does have dynasty rankings, and I like their rankings. I don't personally necessarily always agree with them, but they give an excellent example, and I think they really do represent what the consensus believes are dynasty values, right? Like I've said probably a million times on this channel, dynasty value is subjective, and the Fantasy Pros rankings does an excellent job of reflecting where people's value are, where players' values are currently as the season goes on and as they trend. Another site that I love to use that I feel is a little less known is dynastyleaguefootball.com. They have a lot of excellent free content, and they have individual players' rankings and profiles as well. As that's another one I use very regularly just to see where they have a player ranked before I make any major decisions on my own. Now, when it comes to general research, things like YouTube and podcasts, they only take you so far. There's a certain point where you have to do your own research, and one of the best ways to do that is through Player Profiler. If you're playing Dynasty and are not constantly using playerprofiler.com, you're just simply doing it wrong, man. It's a must. They break down very specific stats that even if a player isn't producing in fantasy, there might be these underlying stats that might show they have a breakout coming, right? Or reasons they could succeed, or reasons why their success isn't gonna last, right? They break down all of that. They also show combine results and past injuries, which is so valuable in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Next site that I use constantly is Football Outsiders, right? You can make a free account. You can also make a paid account to get more features, but I only have the free one. And you get all of my offensive line rankings and all of the snap counts and running back success rankings and things of that nature all come from Football Outsiders. So those are two sites that you must be using when you're looking into the details when it comes to these specific dynasty players. Now, I know this might seem overwhelming. I know you probably don't want to spend hours each week consuming Dynasty content. Now, I'm not saying that you need to make Dynasty Fantasy Football your part-time job to get to a point where you have success, but these resources that I just mentioned, they'll guide you, right? They'll help you. They'll get you at least most of the way there and help you make these really difficult decisions that sometimes there's just no right answer, and you have to make that gut decision that should be informed by the resource that we just talked about. The best way to lose your league, the best way to be terrible at Dynasty is look exclusively at where a player ended up on the season and exclusively look at their fantasy output, right? You could be like, oh, well, this player, I mean, he was a top 5 wide receiver last season. Yeah, but he had boom bust games. The other players were dealing with injury. There's so many other things that exclusively looking at fantasy output just does not highlight. So you need to go a little bit deeper if you want to have success in Dynasty. And to wrap it up, guys, we got to throw in the secret sauce there. One thing that will make your Dynasty League from mediocre to one of your favorite hobbies, and that's who is in your league, right? When you're setting up a league, in my opinion, you need anywhere from 8 to 10 to 12 guys that you know, right? People that you enjoy, people you know that are going to be consistent, people that aren't going to be sketchy, people that are competitive, people who love the NFL. If you can get a group of people like that, then it's just gonna make the league so much fun. And you need to make some kind of platform. You need to find something where everyone can talk, whether it's a big text chain, whether it's Discord, Slack, Facebook Messenger, I don't care what it is, but the league that I'm in, we are constantly talking about football. Every single day, someone's posting something, talking shit. They're in there sending out different, memes or things of that nature that just makes it so much more fun. And I know everyone in there is just so competitive and so dedicated to winning that it takes everything up to the next level. So that is the secret sauce. Find people who are like-minded like yourself. And if you're looking for people, go join the Discord channel, man. That's where you'll find people to start, even potentially start up a league with guys in there. All right, guys, that's all from me, man. I really hope you took some value from this. Whether you're brand new to Dynasty and had no idea what to expect, what to set up, or if you've been playing it for years and are just trying to tweak your league a little bit to make it more fun, I hope you took some value from this. As you all know, I love Dynasty Fantasy Football. I remember first starting, and initially it was difficult, but then it combined my addiction to redraft leagues, my love for college football, and then made it a year-long hobby and just made it 10 times more fun. So I highly suggest it to everybody out there. And again, I want to thank all of you for your support, for the likes, the comments. I love interacting with you guys. Follow me on Instagram at fantasy.football.buff. Send me screenshots of your team and we'll talk about it in these upcoming videos. Noah and I love talking about your players, about trades that you're thinking about making, and discussing that on here. I appreciate you all, and we'll see you next time. Peace.